Thank you all for coming.
All right, so we are at 4 o'clock. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So to start this off, hello and welcome to the Four Corners Lecture Series. This week, of course, as many of you know, we will be having Rebecca Hammond presenting Ute History. So before we get into the presentation, we have a few things to talk about. First off, we want to give a special thanks to Dylan Schwint and Taylor Hasbrook for putting all this together for us. We'd also like to thank the Colorado Humanities and National Endowment for the Humanities. Funding has been provided by both the Colorado Humanities and National Endowment for the Humanities as part of the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security CARES Act Economic Stabilization Plan of 2020. All right, some tips and tricks for Zoom. So if you have talking heads, which you should, you can do a couple things, which in a few minutes I will turn my video off and you should only be able to see Becky. But if you hover over the talking heads, you have the option to have your speaker view only, which you can go ahead and click. And if that screen is in your way, you can move it around left, right, bottom, top, however you want to do that. We're going to ask that you ask your questions via the Q&A function, not the chat function. So we're happy to have you guys in the chat saying hi, making comments and all that. But definitely for your questions, put them in the Q&A. That's where we'll see them and respond to them. If you're having any issues with Zoom as your viewing apparatus, go ahead and you can either log off and log back in and see if that works, or you can also view the webinar on facebook.com/Crow Canyon Archaeological Center. And of course, if you have missed any of our webinars, you can go ahead and subscribe to Crow Canyon on YouTube at crowcanyon.org/YouTube and see past presentations as well as this one as soon as it's up. So at Crow Canyon, the mission is to empower present and future generations to make the human past accessible and relevant through archaeological research, experiential education, and American Indian knowledge. And you can always visit the Crow Canyon site at www.crowcanyon.org. And just to get you ready for what's coming up next week, next Thursday, October 4th, we will have Merritt Munson presenting Color in the Ancestral Pueblo Southwest at 4 p.m. as usual, Mountain Standard Time, of course. If you are interested in contributing to any Native American groups during this crazy time, you can definitely do that by going to any of these websites and making donations. As you can see, there are links to the Pueblo Relief Fund, the Navajo Nation COVID Relief Fund, the Hopi Relief Fund, Navajo and Hopi COVID Relief Fund, as well as the Bluff Area Mutual Aid Fund. All right, so a little bit of background on Miss Rebecca Hammond, or Becky, as she is more commonly referred to. Becky works as both the Native American Outreach Coordinator and an educator at Crow Canyon. And she's been at Crow Canyon for 22 years. Besides being a fabulous educator, Becky also does amazing beadwork in her spare time. And if you would like to know more about that, you can go ahead and get in touch with her by email, which will be sent out after the presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, mute and turn off my video, and let Becky go ahead and dive into her presentation. Enjoy.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for joining our webinar. I'm looking very forward to it. When I wanted to, this PowerPoint is, very um, um, the part of the PowerPoint that I want to present is not, I try to make it as broad as I could. And, I was very fortunate here at Crow Canyon to be able to put this PowerPoint together. And it was really fun doing a lot of the photos that you're going to see are going to be a lot of my favorite photos. There's a lot of photos, so I'm going to talk a little fast just because I want to get through them. Part of it is the history. In Ute culture, we have a saying when I was growing up, because we're such a small tribe, a lot of people never heard of Ute people. And in a way, we were okay with that because we know who we are. And we're okay that not everybody knows about us because we already know that. And so, but it's gotten to be where, times are changing and a lot of our kids need to know a lot of our history and our background. I was asked to do a Ute component here at Crow Canyon. They're also working on a Navajo component uh, for our classes. And we also, because there's so much history here in not just ancestral Pueblo people, but we got to reach out to other people and help spread that knowledge as well. So let's get started. So I wanted to just thank the Denver Public Library because they had a large number of photos that I had found, and special thank you to Peter and Dee Dee Decker who helped get me these photos up in Denver. And so without them, this wouldn't be possible. So thank you to Peter and Dee Dee. So here's a picture of our original land territory. And you all know that Utah is named after the Utes. When the Spanish were in this area, they used to refer us as Utahs. And so we have part of Utah, and you can see a lot of Colorado. The Hunting Territory, expands Oklahoma, a little bit of Texas, Utah, Arizona, up into Wyoming. You can see that this band area was happening in Pueblo culture. We Pueblo people have a clan system, and in our culture we have a band system. So when you look at this picture, you can see Winuch and Chipeta, Muguets, Uncompadre. Those are our band names. And so today there are 7 bands of Utes, and we know there were at least 13 different Ute bands. So people lived in band areas within family units. And so in Colorado, there are only 2 Ute reservations. The first one is the Ute Mountain Ute reservations, which we have Winuch, and the town of Ignacio is the Southern Ute reservation, and they are the Chipeta and Muguets culture tribes. And then in Utah, we have 4 bands, which are the Uncopadre, the Grand River, White River, and Uinta. And they live on the Uinta and Ouray reservation. And so, and then we have a small group of tribal members who live in White Mesa, which are just south of Blanding, Utah, and they are tribally enrolled with us in Toyac. So our people were hunter-gatherers, and we traveled in different places, different with the seasons. And so, we lived in what we call wickiups or lean-tos. And then as, we go on, then people started living in teepees. And oftentimes people will refer to the Plains people as people who lived in teepees, but we also did too. We also lived in the mountains. And so we got access to the plains, and then we also are what we call a Great Basin tribe. So technically, we're kind of in the Great Basin area, if you actually think about it. Um, and so with that, when our people, our Ute people, were known to do beadwork. So what we do is we actually use geometric designs and we also use floral designs. Our people also made baskets. And so when we find baskets recently, there was a piece of a basket found that was at least 5,000 years old. And when we looked at the pattern of it, the pattern is actually the same way that we make our baskets today. So there's probably that relationship. So in our Ute culture, we always say we've always lived here. The Creator put us on top of a mountain peak, and so with Ute people, we can say we are from here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Spanish contact. In 1598, New Mexico was settled by the Spanish. Products started being traded into Ute territory, and in the early 1600s, horses were obtained. And it was really cool because I had a talk with some other colleagues, and we were talking about horses in Spanish, and they were telling me about how, like, the Spanish, you could actually get killed for selling a horse to Ute people. And so in a way, I was like, yeah, we kind of didn't trade them. We probably stole a lot of them. But, we were one of the first tribes to really obtain the horse and really use the horses. So in 1626 is one of the earliest written accounts of Ute people. In 1637 was the first written account of a battle between the Utes and Spanish, and the Spanish took 80 people to work as captives in Santa Fe. First, of course, the first treaty was one of them was in 1670. And this was a peace treaty that was signed. And then the Spanish wanted to come up into this territory. And ever since 1670, every peace treaty that the Ute people have signed with the Spanish, with the United States, every treaty has been broken. So Spanish expeditions, 1760, Utes are letting trade happening, coming in. 1765, Juan Rivera is coming up into this area. He's been here. He was in the area a couple of times. And so when Dominguez and Escalante were ready to go up into Ute territory, they talked to Juan Rivera and asked about which Ute people they should talk to. So when Dominguez and Escalante were coming into this area, they wanted to find a new route to California. And so the Utes took them to different areas. They ended up going as far as like Salt Lake, and they ended up turning around and going back to Santa Fe. So they actually never succeeded. So when you look on the Colorado maps today, it always says Spanish trails. Those aren't Spanish trails. Those are actually Ute trails. So 1806, Zebulon Pike is one of the first ones to come into Ute country. And prior to that, of course, you got the traders who were coming in. And because we lived up in the mountains, our fur was really great. And a lot of our fur got actually sent to England. And people use those. But Zebulon Pike is one of the first people in Ute territory. 1849, the first treaty was signed between Utes and the United States in Abiquiu. Today, Abiquiu is probably more famous by Georgia O'Keeffe. More people know about Georgia O'Keeffe. But this peace treaty that was signed in Abiquiu is like the Weenute, my people's area where they were at down in New Mexico. So in 1850, an agency was established in Taos, New Mexico, and it made sense to have this agency in Taos, and it's because the Utes were coming down from the mountains. You had the Plains people coming in, from the plains, and Taos is kind of the central location, and Pueblo people were coming up, and so it made sense actually to have this agency in Taos. So 1855, a peace treaty. 1859, the gold rush begins. 1861 was the territory of Colorado that was established. And, one of the things when, we're learning history, we don't ever think about like this area was actually Mexico. Mexico owned part of this land and then eventually got moved down. So, but the territory was established first before it ever became a state. So here's a little thing about the Uinta Reservation. So there were some Ute people that lived along the Salt Lake area and over kind of in that Uinta Basin. And my little marker thing, so you see where it says Uinta, just south of there, they actually put the Ute people in this small reservation here, and they couldn't grow anything. It was really hard to live, and they moved them up into that basin area, and that was established in 1864. So that was an early one that was happening in 1868. Kit Carson Treaty. Kit Carson is kind of an interesting guy. He could actually speak Ute. He was really, really terrible to a lot of tribes. He would go and look for tribes, and what he'd do is he'd hire scouts from different tribes to look for other tribes. So it was kind of an interesting thing. And so you can see that we've lost that the mountains, then we were put into what we call today the Western Slope. And you see that it was established, we would have all these acres of land to live on. And here's a photo of the delegation that was sent to Washington, D.C. Chief Ouray was appointed the principal chief of all the Utes. And so I always like these kind of photos because it tells you a lot of what's happening. So here's the delegation again. You can see here's Ouray here. There's a man here standing here. His name is Lafayette Head. And as it turns out, on my mother's side of the family, one of our relatives, his name was Lafayette Head. And so in Toyac, we have a Lafayette Street. And right over on this area, one of these guys is Daniel Boone's son. He was also a part of that. So Chief Ouray was from the Uncompadre band, and Chief Ouray was half Jicarilla Apache, and he was raised in Taos by a Spanish ranching family. And when he turned 18, he left and went to live back up with his father in the Uncompadre band. And Chief Ouray was known to have spoken 4 different languages. And so I think that's one of the reasons why he was appointed that chief, because he could speak all those languages. And also he wasn't one who like wanted to fight so much. So here's a photo of Ouray and Chipeta's house in Montrose. He actually had a couple of houses. This house is actually a couple of miles north of the Ute Museum, which was also one of Ouray's house. So Chipeta is actually Ouray's second wife. Chipeta, Ouray had his first wife, who was named Black Mare, and they had a little boy. And he actually was taken captive and raised by another tribe. I believe it was the Arapaho. And so Black Mare got really sick, and she was friends with Chipeta, and Chipeta helped take care of Black Mare, and then she passed away. And so Chipeta stayed with Ouray and then eventually married him. So 1872, there was a small band of Ute people that were living over where downtown Denver is at one of the parks before it was a park. But and the agency only was open for like 4 years, and then they eventually moved all of the Utes over into the Western Slope. So he's 1872. And then this photo blows me away every time I see it. So one of the government's idea was to kill all the buffalo. So when they kill all the buffalo, then that would hurt all Native people. And that was one way of trying to get rid of Native people, by killing all the food. And you can see all this huge pile is just buffalo skulls. Brunot Treaty, at home we call it Brunot. But this treaty is one that's kind of an interesting one. When they discovered gold around Telluride, up in that area, the story goes, and I've never had it confirmed, but the story goes that Brunot went to Chief Ouray and said, if you give us this piece of land, we'll find your son for you. And so, and there were other reasons, not just, we'll find your son for you, but this land was given away or taken away because of the gold. The story goes, Ouray and the Arapahoes were in Washington, D.C., and this young gentleman goes to Ouray and says his name, and he says, I'm not Ute, and then goes back to the other tribe. And so this treaty is part of our water rights. It also today is one where we actually can hunt all year round if we need to. And so what we do, and just like the United States today, they still sign treaties with countries. And so when we look at these treaties, we are upholding the government on what we sign or we're forced to sign. And so we try and uphold these treaties. And so these treaties, even though we're 100 years old, we're still upholding them. And, in the last 20 years, we finally got our water rights on one of them. So here's a cool photo. So here's Ouray, here's Chipeta, and Chipeta's brother is this gentleman here, and he had two names. His first name is Ba'a, and his other name was Avant D, which means autumn deer. And Ba was one of Chief Ouray's sub-chiefs, and so he was wanting to do a little more fighting. And then this gentleman, they say, is Chief Ouray's father. So 1877, the Southern Ute Agency was established for even my tribe, my band. And the Southern Ute Agency is actually just south of Ignacio. And so they put that together. That was in 1877. So all the tribes lived together. This is one of my favorite photos because this little girl here probably didn't want to sit for too long. And so she just kind of laid down and they took the photo.
Becky.
So, and you can tell in the photo, you can see where, our cradle boards, you can see the high back that's happening. And then, some of the beadwork. So the beads that we're getting, we're trading with the fur traders and stuff when they brought the beads. And so like many tribes, Ute people and other tribes just really took to the beading and started using it. And so you got like these certain colors that they had.
Just to let you know, when you're talking about specific people in the pictures, people aren't seeing your pointer move.
Oh, okay. They're not?
Yeah.
Can you see it?
So you're just going to have to be a little more specific and say like,
how about if I use, can
right.
You see it now?
Yeah, now it's moving.
See it now.
Ah, okay.
Awesome.
It's because I got two screens. Sorry, guys. I'd go over it again, but I won't. Okay, so all the things, just like all over Indian country, one of the things is when people are invading other people's territory and coming in, and you got, everybody, Anglo people moving into this area, of course, they don't want anybody else there. So William Vickers started this campaign, and he wanted to move all the Ute people out of Colorado. And he would write these stories in the Tribune, and he would say, the Utes were killing and they were scalping and doing that. But yeah, they probably were. But at the same time, other people were actually lying about it. In Utah, there's a place called the Meadow Massacre, and it was where a lot of the Mormons actually dressed up as Indians and killed these other people and blamed it on the Paiute people. And then they finally actually said that they were sorry because they actually lied about it. So that was just like in this year sometime when they finally admitted that they were the ones who did it. So you see things like this in the paper, and I guess it's not so different when we think about it today and how the media puts things. So this newspaper slogan is "The Utes must go," and so this was one of the ones that was on the front uh, cover of the Denver Tribune. And so you can see you got 4 people with war bonnets on. And this is the one where I like to talk a little bit about, war bonnets. When we see like models wearing war bonnets, or people dressing up as in Halloween, or, people are wearing these war bonnets. These war bonnets, it's an honor. You actually have to earn the right to wear a war bonnet. And so I think of this woman as my hero because she must have done something to earn the right to wear that. And so war bonnets, today still you have to earn the right to wear them. And so, war bonnets are really, important. So 1879, if you are from Colorado, people call this, the Meeker Massacre. And then there's Thornburg. General Thornburg is coming from Wyoming. He's hearing that the Utes are creating this uprising. Utes are saying, don't come into Ute country, because if you do, there's going to be a battle. The Thornburg battle is also known as the Milk Creek battle. And so Nathan Meeker is kind of an interesting guy. He is known for helping create Greeley. I can't remember the town now because now I'm put on the spot. But he's an interesting guy. He's friends of the governor, and he became the agent for the Northern Utes. And so what he wanted to do, of course, was to have everybody become farmers. And Ute people, today still, we like to gamble. And we also are not farmers, weren't farmers. And so Nathan Meeker plowed up one of the farm fields that they had, and the people didn't like it. A man went into the agency and stabbed Nathan Meeker in the mouth with a stake and killed him. And then they took his wife and his daughter and somebody else captive and took them into the mountains. Chief Ouray had to come from Montrose and help negotiate and get the captives back. And here's a photo of Red Cliff, where they said some of the people hid out while the fighting was happening. So try this. Yeah. All right. Chief Ouray ends up going to Washington, D.C. He has to negotiate to help fix whatever's happening. He comes back from Washington, D.C., and he passes away. So he was 47 when he passed away. They say he had Bright's disease, which I believe is kidneys. And then the Northern Ute bands were forced out of Colorado. And during that walk, we actually lost hundreds of people as well. And so people don't even know about, that forced removal out of Colorado. And that's what put more of the bands on that Uinta reservation. I'll try this. All right, 1896 land allotments, also known as the Dawes Act. With this is happening, so it happened all over Indian country. So the Dawes Act is this thing where, you are given a certain amount of land. And in the government's idea is eventually people will start selling these lands, and then there won't be any more reservations. But if you think about it, so you got a family, you got the mom and dad, and you got like 3 kids, and you got 60 acres to farm. So when these kids get big, they have families, they're still farming that same land. And then their family gets bigger again, and it's still the same land. So it's really not that much land that's actually being farmed. And also, when you're put on reservations where farming's not possible, it's really hard to do. So land allotments were happening. Our chief at the time for the Weenooch band was Chief Ignacio. And Chief Ignacio didn't believe in land allotments. And so he moved at least 300 people just south of where Mesa Verde is, and the people lived in Mancos Canyon. And so they lived there for a little bit of time. And here's a picture of the agency, which they call Navajo Wash Agency, that was created. And so, you got the people living in Mancos Canyon, which is still a ways away, but they created that agency for the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe. Reservation life was really hard, as you know, or maybe you don't know. But I ended up talking to some of my grandmas, and my grandma was, talking about what life was like. And she said, when people were talking about the Great Depression, she said, we never even knew that was happening because we were still busy trying to survive ourselves. And you're put on this reservation. You can't even go outside of the reservation to hunt for your family. So if there's no deer, what are you going to feed them? And so this particular thing happened in Minnesota, where there was a Sioux tribe that went off the reservation. 33 men were caught because they went out hunting to try and feed their families. They were brought back onto the reservation, and Abraham Lincoln approved to have them all hung. And so, reservation life is definitely harder. So here again, this is kind of a cool photo, just because we got the corn in the background. You got a little girl with her little sister. She's taking care of her. So I really like this photo just because somebody did try and farm. 1890. Here's a couple of our wiki up type of structure. Just south of where Toyac is today. You can tell it's south of it because you can actually see the toe of the Ute right above these women. Here's another one with a shade house and a teepee, and there's the toe of the Ute. So this is down just south today, just south of where our construction company is. So. There was the agency, they finally moved it up into Toyac proper. And these were actually dorms and how our schools, which didn't actually last a long time. The houses weren't built for a really, really long time. My mom said she grew up on, a tent and teepee. And so I lived out there. And then you got a picture of the kids playing miniature golf. And I was showing this PowerPoint to our elder committee, and I asked, because in this photo you can see there's a little fountain, and I said, did that fountain ever work? And they laughed, and they're like, yeah, when I was a little girl I used to put my feet in the water and stuff. So I was like, oh, how cool would that be to actually get that to work again? But as you can see, and I know that my second mother, Lorna Green, is listening to this PowerPoint. Here is, when I was a kid, this was the Head Start where Lorna worked. And so this building is actually still standing today. And someday we'll get the fountain working. It'll be cool. So 1906 land trade for Mesa Verde. So this was a really interesting thing. I was reading some of the reports and stuff about it. So the land that we're actually talking about is right here. So here's Mesa Verde. Mesa Verde is surrounded by 3/4 of the reservation. So a lot of people credit the Weatheralls for finding or discovering the cliff dwellings, but Ute people knew about them. And, one of the things is, it's not a part of our culture with the cliff dwellings and stuff. And so we're told never to go in them and stuff. And so, that's why our tribal park and other stuff, they're still left the way we found them. And so as people and like the Weatheralls, bringing in people, Nordenskjöld coming in and taking all the artifacts away. When Nordenskjöld took the artifacts away, the story goes was the agent actually from Southern Ute called the police when they were boarding the train, and it was 2 train cars full of artifacts that were taken away, which we actually just got back. And because there were no laws, they got to take them. But if you think of it this way, in 1906, this was still reservation land, even before 1906. So when the Weatheralls are coming in, other people were taking those in Nordenskjöld, they were taking it while it was still reservation land. So when people wanted this land, first the ladies of the cliff dwellers wanted to lease the land. The Weatheralls had leased the land for just ranching. So they were ranching their cattle when they discovered these sites. So Mesa Verde, the people went to the tribe and said, we would like to trade you land. We'll give you more land than what we want, than what we want. And the council said, what land are you talking about? And they said, oh, we'll give you the north half of the Ute Mountain. And the tribe said, well, we already own that land. And so they didn't really say no. And the government just said, okay, you know what, we're going to take it anyway. Threw a check, here you go, and took the land. And then in 1923, they wanted more land, and the tribe said no. And so it wasn't really a nice trade for that land, and that's kind of how we lost Mesa Verde. 1912, marking of Ute Trail Pass. This trail goes from the top of the Rocky Mountains and into the plains. It's actually one of the oldest trails documented routes in existence. So these are some of my favorite photos. So when they did this route and documented it, they had this whole party that was going on. So in 1912, there's Colorado Springs, where some of the old photos said they were in the old zoo. So I'm not sure where that is because I haven't looked it up. But you can see they're all there. Here's a photo. Here's Chipeta right here. And we found this photo in the Southern Ute book. And this little girl, it said, was my grandmother. And because Chipeta was my grandmother's aunt, and she used to take care of my grandmother when my grandmother was a little girl. But as I was looking through the photos, that's not my grandma. So, and then we talked about Ba'a. His Anglo name was Peter Snow, Luke Snow, and this is his son, Peter. So that's my great grandfather. There's that little girl that was sitting by Chipeta. So I thought that was kind of cool to see. But then I also wanted to show, here's the 2 pots that are made. It's a basket, and to make it watertight, you use the pinion pitch to seal it. And this photo, here's my grandmother, her little sister, my great grandmother, and my great grandmother. And so this was just kind of fun to see, and I just thought I'd throw it in there because it's part of my history. So in 1923, there was a war in Utah, and they often call it the Bluff War or Posey's War. And so Posey was, or they called him Paiute Posey. Posey was one of the renegades that would kind of terrorize everybody, all the Mormon people and stuff. And he was known for this war in this area, and he was the White Mesa folks know a lot about it, but he is also my grandmother was Ora Posey, that was her grandfather. So he's kind of one of my heroes just because he never gave up. And then eventually he was shot and he passed away hiding out. 1924, Chipeta passes away. Chipeta was loved in Montrose and in the town of Ouray, and she had a lot of relatives, and so she would travel in between the Northern Ute Reservation in Utah and the town of Ignacio. And so she had a great number of relatives. And so this is a photo, and this guy is McCook, which says it's her brother. And so she lived a really long life. There's one of her last photos of her. All right, question. 1924, anybody know what happened? Besides Chipeta died. And since you can't answer me, I'm actually going to tell you. We became partial citizens of the United States. So that was a huge deal, even though we lived here forever. Oh, and I'm going to finish early. Wow, it's kind of crazy. All right, so here's our bear dance. So the bear dance is pretty unique. There are a couple other tribes who do the bear dance. We have a story that the bear dance, what happens is in Toyac, I think it would have been our 130th annual bear dance. We know our bear dance has actually gone on a lot longer than what we found in written history. We see it throughout the Ute rock art that are in this whole area. And we believe in the story that a warrior went out with his brother, and they were hunting, and the she-bear saw them and fell in love with one of the brothers and took him. And she kept him, and the other brother went back to the village and said that his brother was captured, and the next year he missed his brother, so he went out looking for him, and he found him, and he brought him back home, and he brought back the bear dance. So we celebrate the bear coming out of hibernation and the beginning of spring. So when we do our bear dance, it's women's choice. And so people come out into the bear dances, and we have one in Toyac, one in White Mesa, and Southern Ute, and I believe the Northern Utes have at least two bear dances, maybe three, because they live in different band areas. And so it's the beginning of spring, so it's actually that opportunity to meet your potential mate. In this photo, you can see here's the singers, and they use a rasp, and they rub it up and down, which represents the bear growling. And then you got the women facing west and the men facing east. And the gentleman that's standing here is what we call the cat man. And what he does is he keeps order. And then the women, when the music starts, you start dancing back and forth. So 3 steps forward, 3 steps back. And then the cat man actually divides you, so you dance individually with your partner. And today, that's where you get like all your numbers and other stuff like that. So I was really interested. We have a lot of rock art in our tribal park that's Ute. And as I was looking around, I became interested. This drawing is actually a drawing of our last traditional chief, Chief Jack House. Chief Jack House passed away in the mid-70s. And so he did a lot of drawings in our tribal park. And I was really interested in this woman because she has these 3 red dots on her face. And you can see here's part of a sun. Chief House, his Ute name was Hand in the Sun. But this woman had the 3 dots. And then when I started looking at some of the old photos, I noticed that there were 3 dots on some of the women's faces. And so I asked about that, and I was told that, it's a sign of mourning when one of your relatives pass away. What we do is we cut our hair. We don't dance for a year. And back in the day, they used to put the dots there. And then I was told that when you are a true orphan, that's when you put those 3 dots on to say that you no longer have your parents with you. So, but our other dance that we have, and I skipped it because I totally forgot, is our sun dance, which is actually our sacred ceremony where our men dance just like the other Plains people and other people in the Great Basin, especially the Shoshone and other people have the sun dance. We also do our sun dance. And of course, our powwow, which is also something that we participate in as well. So here is the photo that I first showed you of our original land territory. And here's what it is today. So we only own 2% of our original land territory. So you can see where Ute Mountain is written right here. This is where White Mesa is. So White Mesa is in Utah, and you can see on our tribal seal, we show White Mesa, and even on the Ute Mountain Ute Reservation, we actually have a small amount of land in New Mexico. And so you can see the Northern Ute Reservation has the eagle and the people there, and they actually have expanded and gotten more of their land back. So they have a huge chunk of land. And yet our Southern Ute, our sister tribe here, and you can see, the mountains, you got oil, you got, farming, cattle, sheep. And so in Toyac today, Toyac is actually one of the largest employers of Montezuma County. We have now become farmers. We have 2 construction companies. Of course, we have our casino. We also have our farm and ranch enterprise. And so we grow corn, our feed corn goes to Purina. We have a number of dairy farms that our alfalfa goes to as well. And so we can say we're farmers, I guess, on a big scale. So, all right, I think we can take some questions.
All right. So we got some questions here for sure for you. I'm going to start with some of the kind of shorter answer questions. So Ute have parks, right? Where are they, and when and can we come? So Ute Mountain Tribal Park.
Okay, our Ute Mountain Tribal Park is located just south of Mesa Verde, and it's an extension of cliff dwellings. And so we give private tours, so you can go on the Ute Mountain Ute Tribal Park website and ask about reservations. I know this summer we were closed due to COVID, so COVID's going to play a lot of what's happening in this area.
Okay, when does the bear dance take place?
For our bear dance in Toyac, we always do it on the first weekend of June. So and the Southern Utes are usually on, was it Labor Day? No, Memorial Day, which is in May. May, yeah, at the end of May. But Toyac's is always the first weekend in June.
Okay, so most of the rest of these are longer, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. But if we have to cut you off, we'll try to put them in elsewheres. So after I'm doing them in order of when they came in now. So if you need to skip back to a slide or something, please do. So the first question is from Donna is, after Meeker, when the Northern Utes were removed from Colorado, where were they removed to?
They were put They were put on the Ute and Ouray reservation. So they kind of were in this area here and then moved over into Utah.
Okay. And then I hope I'm not saying this wrong, but Renee Fetters had a few questions. When you were talking about the agency, she asked if those were the boarding schools, and if they were on the reservation.
Agencies are a little bit different than boarding schools. Agencies were set up for an agent to be able to distribute other things. The boarding school is a little bit different. There are the boarding school that happened in Toyac didn't actually last very long, and a lot of our people ended up going to Southern Ute, to the boarding school there. And you do hear like those horror stories about how bad they were.
And she also asked who taught at the schools.
I don't know. I guess I have no idea. I don't. That's a good question, because I don't know if they're like like a certain like Mennonites or other people like that. I don't think that was the case in our area, but I know what you're talking about, like for other boarding schools, and I don't think it was that.
Okay.
Good question, though.
So Adrian asked, when you said the oldest route is Ute Trail leading from the it moved, hold on. Leading from the Rocky Mountains to the plains, is this the Ute Trail, which is north of Salida?
Yep. Yes, it is. Sorry, not yet.
Can you give some information on the Telluride blanket?
Can I give information on what?
The Telluride blanket.
Oh, the Telluride blanket is actually, it's Pueblo. It's ancestral Pueblo. It's not Ute, from what I understand.
Okay. Sharon asks, how were the cradle boards carried, head straps or arm straps, and were the cradle boards covered with leather?
Yes, the cradle boards were covered. They used buckskin. And let's see if I can find one real quick. So you can see she's got the baby on her back. So there are straps there to help hold the baby.
And they go around the arms.
And then you put the baby in. It's kind of like putting on your shoe. So you put the baby in. You can see here you got this little thing that's made out of willow. And so that helps shield the baby, like a shade. And it also helps protect the baby.
So is it carried kind of like a backpack? So it goes
kind of
over
like
the shoulders?
almost, but they use straps to help carry it, and then you can also use the straps to like put it in a tree so that the baby sways.
Cool. Ken Cable asks, were dogs part of the tribe's daily lives?
Dogs definitely were. Hi, Ken. So, and bad dog. So there were some good dogs and there are some bad dogs. But yeah, definitely dogs that, we do find dogs, in archaeological sites. So, there are some old photos that have pictures of little travois where dogs help carry things as well. So dogs definitely were a big part.
Okay. You talked about horses. Sorry, this is from Mary. You talked about horses. Are they still around in wild?
Yeah, we definitely have a huge number of wild horses that are a big part of the landscape, and then we, in Ute culture and like many other native cultures, it's kind of like the more horses you have, the more cattle you have, the wealthier you are.
Okay. So bloop. Let me go down a little bit here. Can you explain the difference between Paiute and Ute?
Okay, well, our language, the Ute language, we are the Shoshonean branch of the Uto-Aztecan language, and Paiute is part of in that linguistic category. So there are words we definitely can understand, but we can't totally speak the language, but we understand a lot of the words. They're pretty similar. There's actually a conference that they do for all Shoshonean branch language speakers that different tribes host. And so there are Paiute that is probably the closest that we can understand.
Okay, and Ben would like to know if the Utes do a circle dance now or ever.
I guess I'm not familiar with the circle dance, but if you're talking about like a round dance, yes.
And they do they do it now?
Huh? We do round dance, yeah, different occasions. We also do this other dance, and now I can't remember the name of it because they don't do it very often, which is I can't remember the name of it. But if you're referring to a round dance, yes, definitely.
Okay. And do you guys have total autonomy over your schools today, as in designing your own curriculum and all that?
Okay, on Toyac, where I live on the Ute Mountain Ute Reservation, we actually don't have a school, not yet. We are actually working on building a school and starting off K through 1 next year. But the Southern Ute Tribe has a Montessori school where they work with curriculum and Ute culture together.
Awesome. From the pictures you have with the 3 dots, what does it mean to not have your parents, and why would a person need to know that outside of the mourning period?
Well, the 3 dots, I don't know how long they had to wear them, but it was just a way of showing, just part of the culture, like cutting our hair and not dancing for a year. So, and I just thought it was really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Did the Ute people really call Pikes Peak Tava for thousands of years before Zeb Pike came to Colorado?
Oh, yeah. All the mountain peaks had Ute names.
And since it's true, what's the translation of the word Tava?
Well, see, Tava, so sun, Tava, I think is sun.
Sun, okay.
Yeah,
and
if anybody ever goes to like the History Colorado in Denver, they actually have some of that information about it there. It's kind of removed from us because we don't talk about Pikes Peak because we were pushed away from there.
Okay. What are your thoughts on prayer trees?
Prayer trees? If I told you, I'd have to kill you. No, I'm just kidding. They're set there for, there for a reason. I mean, it's just, why are there shrines? So it's just something that's out there. We also have trees, the bent trees that people used as well. And you can see on the cradle board here, there are still trees that we're finding where they cut out that piece of wood to make the cradle board.
Okay. Do you have a problem with outsiders trying to obtain your mineral rights?
We no, mineral rights is kind of a thing that, from what I understand, like some tribes don't have some of the mineral rights underneath what's on the top, and our tribe totally does. So it really depends on who you're working with for mineral rights.
Okay. What is the role of women in the administration of the tribe? Do women participate in tribal politics?
Yes, women do participate in tribal politics. we adopted a constitution, and so we actually have a voting where you vote, and so people who would like to run for those titles can, and we've had a number of women who were on the council and also the chairwoman. So lots of participation, yes.
Awesome. So it is 5 o'clock, and I know some of you are going to have to go ahead and jump off. So thank you guys for showing up and participating in this talk. We are going to, Becky has agreed to stick around for about 10 minutes or so to answer some other questions. But if you do have to leave, have a great evening, and thanks for coming. And we will jump right back into some questions. All right, so what is the relationship between the Utes who have always been here and the ancestral Puebloans, and how does that translate to present times, especially in relation to Bears Ears?
Well, we all have, the stories that talk about Bears Ears and how people, many tribes have used that area. And so, it's just part of it is talking together and working it out. We, like in our tribal park, we don't claim the sites because we know that they are part of the ancestral Pueblo people. So, I think, having, being able to help protect them is, always a good thing. And so we're working with all the tribes, in that relationship with Bears Ears and working together. So I think it's a good thing.
Awesome. So I think you already answered this, but somebody asked if there are guided tours not into the tribal park, into the mountain range, into Ute Mountain Range.
Oh yeah, no. The only one you can go and call and get a reservation is for our tribal park, but our mountain is strictly because it's sacred to us. We don't ever allow anybody else up there.
All right. Are the petroglyphs in 9 Mile Canyon Ute?
I'm sure there are probably some Ute rock art. I actually have never been in 9 Mile Canyon. I'd love to go.
Same. Kind of a similar question. Can you shed any light on the relationship between the ancestral Puebloans and the Utes?
Shed some light. That's a good one. I think, part of the relationship is being able to work together and acknowledging that Ute people were kind of around the same time. There are a couple different stories, like with Hopi. The interesting thing that I find interesting is that Hopi are in that same linguistic category as us. So they are Uto-Aztec and that part of that Shoshone branch language that we have. So we're very similar with them. They're Pueblo and we're hunter-gatherers.
Okay. Are there sacred trees associated with either the sun dance or the bear dance? Or any dance?
That I don't know.
Okay. In Utah, we have several rock sketches of one of the Ute chiefs' train trip to Washington. Was that Ouray, and do you know the story?
Did they have trains back with Ouray? And I don't know the story. I know what you're talking about because I've seen the rock art, but we don't know for sure which chief it was.
Okay.
It's like red something.
Okay. Is it possible to get a permit to visit archaeological sites in the Southern Ute Indian tribal land?
I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know if they have, like a tribal park, they don't have a tribal park like we have. I know that there are some archaeological sites there, but I don't know of anybody visiting our reservations for them.
Okay. Did you say Catman or Capman with regard to the bear dance? If Catman, what is the idea story behind the name or designation?
They just call him the Catman. There's actually no story behind it. They just call him the Catman that I know of.
I think you just touched on this a little bit. Are the Ute and Shoshone languages similar or the same?
They're in the same linguistic category. I'm sure that there's probably a few words that are similar.
Okay. Somebody asked if we can post the names of the organizations for contributions. If I'm not mistaken, they go out after, but we can definitely, Becky, if you want to stop sharing your screen, I can put that up real quick.
Sure. There you go.
All right, and then let me pull up our Q&A here again. There we go. So, did I stop sharing? It's still sharing, right? Nope.
I'm not seeing your screen yet.
There we go. I think.
There we go.
Is it there? All right.
Yeah, we can see it now.
So, covered that. Ute are rarely included in archaeological literature, discussions, research, or even in museums. In major museums in Arizona, Utes are not included. I've wondered why. Can you comment?
Well, it's a good question. You know, and I think part of it was because we're a pretty small tribe. You know, when I was at the Field Museum, I interned there. And so I was working in the anthropology department, and I asked about Utes, and people were like, oh, I never heard of that. And then I had to actually find things that were Utes, and they actually put like all these different tribes together. So, you know, we're a pretty small tribe, and that relationship with Arizona, there's not as much, you know, besides people traveling to different places to gather specific plants in the past. So that, and that might be one of the reasons why.
Okay. The Utes were and are great horse people, right?
Yes.
Are Ute Mountain tribal members smoke jumpers in the current fires out west?
We do have a fire, our firefighters, so we part of the agency where I'm sure our people are, you know, that division has gone out fighting fires.
Okay. Can you give us, since we've only got like 5 or so minutes left, can you give us a quick description of your own family tree?
A quick description of my own family tree. Okay, so my great grandmother on my mother's side was Ruby Stone, who was from Northern Ute, and then they were married into, and then we have Avanti, so Peter Snow, who is in part of that lineage from that Northern Ute tribe and Southern Ute and Toyac. On my father's side, it's Chief Posey, who is like my great grandfather from the Utah area. And so we have, you know, that kind of that relationship and that part of that knowledge. And so my mother was really good with the genealogy and, you know, telling us who belongs to who. And so we have part of that history. And so, you know, it's kind of fun when you actually find photos and they tell you a lot about it. So genealogy wise is part of, you know, part of that history of being, you know, not just stuff that was written down, but oral stories of who you are is something that we still do and talk about. So
okay,
I don't know what else to say.
Has the Ute language been preserved, and is it spoken today?
Less people are speaking it, but we're hoping that with this new school that they're going to build. That's part of that incorporation, to build, bring back so that our kids are there and can speak. One of my uncles said something really cool was, you don't lose your culture. Your culture's sitting in the corner in a box waiting for you to come and get it. So you got to go get it so that you can teach it and have your kids learn and understand who they are and where they come from. It's important.
Okay.
So we're working on it.
Yeah. Did the Ute people interact with the people of Chaco Canyon?
I don't know. They might have traded.
Awesome.
It's not impossible.
Yeah.
But Chaco's out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. Were the Utes part of the Mormon War?
There are parts of Mormon War, different parts, yeah. Black Hawk War, a couple other ones. I can't remember right off the top of my head.
Okay. Where did the Ute ancestors come from pre-Columbian period?
It's a good question. That's a really good question. If you follow it linguistically, it's Uto-Aztec, and so parts of it are from Mexico. So, and it could have been, part of that movement up into this area. But then there are also other stories that talk about faraway places of where we probably came from. But, in Ute, we have actually a word for elephant. So, and there are no elephants here, so that kind of tells you that it was the woolly mammoth.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
So we've been around for a long time.
Yeah. And that kind of answers another question that we had of how far back can the Utes be traced? Oldest archaeological evidence or oral stories. So that's pretty much the same answer?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about current and past relationships with the Navajo?
Well, in the past, of course, Utes didn't get along with Navajo, but today, there's this, and people still don't. There are some people who don't get along, but it's like that all over the world. But if you want things done, everybody has to learn how to work together in order to get things accomplished.
Yeah.
It's 12 after.
Yeah. Do you want to do a couple more?
Yeah, real quick.
Okay. All right. So, how close are the Ute and Hopi languages? Like, for instance, are they as close as, say, French and Spanish? Can you understand any of the words spoken in Hopi?
You can understand some words, not all of it. There are some words that you can actually say, oh, yeah, that means, yeah. So,
okay. Cool. Are you able to touch on the history of the Spaniards, such as the Escalante expedition and their interactions with the Ute people?
Well, really what the Spanish, really what they were wanting to do was kind of trade in this area, maybe to see what was here, part of, whatever they were looking for. When Dominguez and Escalante came into this area, they were looking for a new route to California. And so when the Utes were taking them around, they actually didn't take them where they wanted to go. They just took them here and there to different places. So they ended up having to go back to Santa Fe. So, but part of that relationship was really for them to try and get into Ute country.
Okay. So this is going to be probably one or two more questions real quick. Who was included in the 7 bands? And do you know if it's documented that if there's documentation of Utes being mixed in with other Great Basin Plains tribes?
I'm sure that there are some documents there. I know there are some Utes that are mixed together with Paiute because that's, part of what White Mesa is. So
Okay.
that does happen.
Okay. And who was included in the 7 bands?
The I took my PowerPoint off. So there's the 4 bands that are in Utah and the 3 bands in Colorado. So Miigwech, Chipeta, and Weenuch that are in Colorado.
Mm-hmm. And White Mesa, right?
And White Mesa, yes.
Yeah. It is 5:15. So Ms. Rebecca Hammond has to leave us. So once again, thank you guys all so much
Thank you guys.
For showing
Thank you
up.
for coming.
And just a quick reminder, since I have this up, the next talk on October 1st will be let me go back. Oh, too far. There you go. All right. We'll be with Merritt Munson, Color in the Ancestral Pueblo Southwest. We hope you guys have a great evening and that you'll join us again next Thursday. We'll see y'all next time. Have a good night.
Thank you.